Welcome to part 6 of the Zentangle OCEAN Project. Last video we started working with our cartoon and non-Zentangle elements. We're going to continue that today. What we're going to look at is sort of a simplified version of two objects. One is a piece of coral and the other is a seahorse. Now we're going to only learn to draw silhouette versions of these because they will primarily be used in the background or in the far distance, and so we don't have to worry about fleshing out any specific details, but it's helpful to know how we're going to draw these shapes when we get to our final project. So let's get started. We don't necessarily need to use a pencil to begin with today, but if you'd like to, you go ahead and do that if you're more comfortable with that. But we're going to start with a coral silhouette. Now there are almost endless different shapes and varieties of coral, so we're just going to simulate a couple that might look reasonably decent in the background of our drawing as needed. I'm going to start at the bottom, and we're just creating these shapes that are irregular, but yet there's a plant-like pattern to them. So I'm doing this slowly so that you can see kind of where my process is taking me. And you don't have to draw it exactly like this one, of course, but this is just one example of what a piece of coral in the background could potentially look like. We've got some really long pieces that come up. And there we have it. Now for our silhouette, we of course would ink this in. So if you wanted to do that, that's completely fine. You can use any pen. If you have a larger pen, that might be helpful. I've got, for example, a little brush pen. It just makes the coloring process go a little more quickly, or that inking process. But if you draw that shape, you get the idea. And then we would ink it into the background somewhere of our drawing. And that black silhouette helps to add contrast and some additional sea life, plant life, or actually coral's not a plant, but it sometimes has that appearance. It will be in the background and just lend a little more fun and interesting stuff into our final drawing. So I wanted to acquaint you with how we might draw this. And of course, if we're drawing it behind something, there could be something in the foreground, so we would only see the top portions and so on. But I will color this in off camera so that you don't have to watch me do that. And so there's a completed silhouette of coral, or at least an example. Now there are other shapes that we could draw as well. So we could make that another sample here for you just to see, just making a pattern that's more like shelf-like, like some of these patterns that you'll see in photographs or diving shows where there's you're getting a view of that coral piece. It almost looks something like that. And so if we were to ink that in, it's going to give us another type of appearance, but still, to the common viewer, that's going to look like a piece of coral in the distance or in the background. So like I said, it's almost endless, and if you have photos or if you look up photos on Google, for example, of coral reefs or coral formations, you can see maybe, well, how could I draw a different formation that would still have that immediate identification as a piece of coral, but it would just be a different shape. And so these are just a couple examples that I wanted to show you, and then you can practice something similar by following my example or by looking up some coral on your own. So there we have a couple different examples of coral, or at least silhouettes of coral, that we can use. So the next shape that I want to introduce you to, I did a quick sketch here of a seahorse. And this is a very simple sketch, but we're not going to be able to use something even with this little amount of detail in it because of everything else going on in the drawing. The size of our seahorse is actually going to be much, much smaller in the final drawing. So we want to learn how to draw a simple silhouette of that seahorse. Now the easiest way that I think anyway that you could do this, just using this as an example, you can see that we have a head shape. Oh, let me turn that light off again for glare. Maybe there we go. We've got a head shape. We have a little snout that's coming off here. And then we have just a simple curve that comes down. And it wraps up and around. And then the front curves pretty tightly here, comes out into his little belly, and then it just wraps down and follows this curve for his tail. And then if we want, we can also add, part of our silhouette would be maybe this little fin, and possibly one down here as well. Now once we have that, that is the shape that we're doing. Now the silhouette won't be this large either, but watch what we can do. In fact, I'll add it to the background of this coral. So just using my pen, I'm going to create his head, the snout that comes off, his little belly, and we can shape and sculpt this a little bit as needed. But it's literally just a little dark silhouette. So we don't need to worry about precision of details and so on. And then we can add our little fin there on his back, and we have a seahorse floating. And we could do another one over here. Maybe this one curls up this way. And not all seahorses have that little fin on their back, so we could leave it off in this case if we wanted to. So just following this basic pattern, you can see how easy it is to make a little seahorse silhouette that could become part of our coral reef somehow. And we could do them on any version that we do, and just we want to gauge our sizing. So I'm going to make this one even smaller. Just like that. If that happened to be the spot that I put that, I could put another one right here kind of behind him. And you can see just by adding those tiny little details what we can create in our sea drawing by adding those little silhouettes that would be off in the distance perhaps. So with those two examples of a coral and seahorse silhouettes, we are going to end this particular session, but I thank you so very much for joining with me. I hope that you have fun practicing these, and I look forward to seeing everyone again real soon back here in the Tangles and Toons channel. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.